Hi, and thank you, Nomi. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's P-EBT webinar, Creating a Robust P-EBT Communications and Outreach Plan. My name is Kelsey Boone, and I am the Child Nutrition Policy Analyst with FRAC. We know that outreach and communication strategies for P-EBT this past spring and summer were difficult to both create and implement. As states look to implement P-EBT 2.0, identifying effective communications and outreach strategies can help ensure access to families. For today's webinar, we have invited speakers from Massachusetts, including the Shaw Family Foundation, Project Bread, and the Department of Transitional Assistance. But first, I wanted to give you a quick update of what was included in the recently passed Consolidated Appropriations Act. Next slide. P-EBT was created through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act this past spring and was extended in the fall in the continuing resolution through fiscal year 2021. Just recently, the Consolidated Appropriations Act provided clarity and flexibilities surrounding the program. Next slide, please. The continuing resolution passed earlier this fall extended P-EBT through fiscal year 2021, expanded benefits to young children, allowed states to make simplifying assumptions, and used the best feasibly available data to support providing benefits given the different ways that schools are operating this school year, and provided funding to fully cover states' costs of administrating the program. The Act provides additional clarity and flexibilities to make it easier for families to receive and states to distribute P-EBT benefits. The Consolidated Appropriations Act allows states to provide P-EBT benefits to all children under the age of 6 whose households participate in SNAP when school or childcare is closed due to COVID-19. It allows states to utilize simplifying assumptions and best feasibly available data to provide benefits, and allows state agencies, schools, and local units to receive funding to cover their pandemic EBT administrative costs. We're eager to see the guidance from USDA on the new provisions in the package, since we know many states are waiting to submit their plan until after the guidance is issued. That being said, there are 3 states that have approved plans to issue benefits this school year, including our speaker's state today, and a few other states that have submitted plans, and if approved before new guidance comes out, will potentially amend after guidance is given. With that update, let's dive into today's topic, communications and outreach strategies. Today, we've invited partners from Massachusetts to discuss their P-EBT communications plan for this school year, as well as best practices from last year. Joining us today is Sarah McKittrick from the Shaw Family Foundation, Alana Davidson from the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance, and Miriam Avila from Project Bread. And with that, I will turn it over to them.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. We are really excited to be here with you all today. My name is Alana, and I am the Acting Communications Director at the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance, or DTA. DTA serves 1 in 8 residents of the Commonwealth with direct economic assistance, or our cash benefit programs, as well as food assistance, which oversees SNAP and P-EBT, as well as workforce training opportunities. We have found P-EBT to be an effective and vital tool for families as we navigate this public health crisis, and are really honored to be able to share with you the work that our agency and our partners have been doing to help make this a successful program in Massachusetts. And so with that, I'd like to turn over to Miriam to introduce yourself.
Hey, everyone. I'm also really excited to be here and talk about P-EBT. My name is Miriam, and I am the Assistant Director of Program Communications at Project Bread. And Project Bread is a statewide organization that works to prevent and end hunger in Massachusetts. So we work to connect individuals and families in Massachusetts with reliable sources of food, as well as advocate for policies that make food more accessible overall. And we operate a food source hotline that helps callers find food resources near them, and answers questions about SNAP and other programs, and help callers apply for SNAP. And so when P-EBT was introduced, we had an influx of calls about P-EBT coming in through our hotline, and we're able to work with DTA to share the questions and challenges that we were hearing on the ground as they came in. And we also work closely with schools and partnered with CTA and SHAW to get the word out to school districts and families in their communities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah at SHAW.
Thank you. Hi, happy to be here. My name is Sarah McKittrick. I'm a project manager at the Shaw Family Foundation. We focus on supporting initiatives at the intersection of community education and healthcare, and we have a strong focus on supporting food security efforts in the state of Massachusetts, and especially Boston. So when we heard about P-EBT, we really want to get involved because we knew how essential it was for families who are struggling during this incredibly difficult time. And we also recognized the incredible economic impact that it could have for our local grocers and our local retailers. So my role in this was to try to build materials and resources to make it as easy as possible for partners and cities and schools to push information out, and then also to identify initiatives to increase P-EBT participation in key cities and communities.
You can go to the next slide. So we just wanted to start with a brief overview of what Massachusetts program looks like, since I know every state is operating differently. So in Massachusetts, we started and had issuances going out March through June. Families received 2 issuances for $399 in total. We were one of the states that issued benefits in September for the month of September, and then actually got out at the end of December. It was a rush, but on December 30th, we were able to issue October and November benefits, and are moving to issue our December benefits January 25th, and then going forward, it'll be monthly. So far, P-EBT has brought over $340 million into our state, and has helped over 500,000 children, so it's a pretty large program. I'm sure compared to some of the other states, maybe it's not as large. But for us, and about 60% of P-EBT recipients are not on DTA programs, either SNAP or TAFDC, which is TANF in Massachusetts. And we have been tracking, which we'll talk about later, a lot of that, but since July, how many P-EBT cards have actually been pinned and used in Massachusetts. And as of yesterday, it was 80%. This morning, I just got the data, and we're at 81% because we had a large amount of cards that recently went out that have been pinned by families. And obviously this is a huge undertaking. So the program is administered jointly between DTA and our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, over 400 school districts across the state. And this work would not have been possible without a lot of our partners. And we're really grateful to be here today with Project Brett and Shaw Foundation, who could have not done this work without, as well as want to thank our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and Mass Law Reform. Next slide. Oh, and I just did want to note, too, that we do not have an application in Massachusetts. So school districts collect the data and send it to our DESI, which sends to us, and then we issue the benefits.
So this was obviously a great program, and Alana and her team did a great job of making it as accessible and easy as possible. But I think, throughout this process, we definitely learned a lot about the barriers that families had in accessing the program, and really how to tweak and build effective communications to respond. And I wanted to start, so we'll talk a little bit more about how we addressed all of these, but I wanted to start by sharing some of the key messages that we really tried to hone in on when we were communicating about P-EBT throughout, the spring and this fall. I think these messages are super important and hopefully can be utilized in other states as well. So the first thing that we were really prioritizing in communications was that P-EBT does not impact you or your child's immigration status. Obviously, this was a huge concern. There was a lot of fear around public charge, so we tried to make this as clear as possible so that families would not be concerned about their immigration status. We also wanted to really make it clear that P-EBT helps your family buy the food that they want. So we tried to include that in all of our messaging just to increase excitement and increase the people that may want to use P-EBT. And we also were really made it clear that P-EBT does not replace grab-and-go school meals, and really encouraged families to use both, and that these were both benefits that they could use and were there for them. We also wanted to make it clear that if you get P-EBT, you are likely eligible for SNAP, and use P-EBT as a sort of jumping off point for getting assistance with other food programs and just helping them find other resources if they are food insecure. And then finally, we wanted to make it clear that P-EBT helps you support your local economy. So using this money helps you buy food, but also is really important to your local businesses and can support local retailers who may have been struggling during the crisis. And tried to also message that if you don't need the funds, you can still use your P-EBT benefits. You can support your local businesses and then donate the value of the cards back. And so we really tried to make it clear that the money is for you. It's for everyone who receives P-EBT benefits. If you don't use it, you lose it. So really trying to push everyone to participate if they could.
Great. So based on the key messages that Miriam just highlighted, we developed a comprehensive statewide outreach plan to reach our constituencies. So these are the key audiences that we targeted in our plan. The tools used to reach these audiences were obviously a little bit different, and we're going to deep dive into those in a moment to tell you what worked best in our case to reach those. Next slide, please. So the first tool that I wanted to touch on before deep diving into those audiences that we built to really lay the foundation for everything was our website, map-ebt.org. We really wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to find information that they needed, and for that it started with the website. If you're looking at it now, recommend that you check it out on your phone. It's made to be viewed on the phone because 98% of the families accessing this are doing so on their phone. If you click the bottom right-hand corner, it's available in 6 different languages, and each of these buttons on this splash page, we learned, how to respond to key issues that families were having, and we wanted to make it really easy for people to navigate around the website. So that's why these buttons are here to help direct people. We also have a page devoted to outreach materials. Again, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to push out information. So here we have our flyers, information on how to activate your P-EBT card. We have sample media, social media posts. We have a press section actually, and then also template, email, robocall, and robotext available for schools, CEP and non-CEP schools. And all of these are available in 10 different languages, and we're continuing to build on these and respond to needs kind of in real time. But I think this was the most successful thing that we did in terms of organizing the information and having a place to go that we can point to for partners to easily get the word out. Just a quick note here. We know that not every state or every city can access this resource, so we know FRAC has compiled an incredible list of resources for people. We're also happy to share. These are all publicly available for download. We are also open to sharing design files too if you want to make it easier for yourself. So feel free to email me to reach out, and the foundation is happy to help. So next slide, please.
So one of the main tools or kickoff tools that we used in Massachusetts was our governor was targeting the press and the media, to reach a wide array of people. When COVID-19 really hit back in the spring, our governor stood up a food security task force out of our COVID-19 command center. And the administration has really been focused on addressing food insecurity, and P-EBT has been a part of that. And so kind of every time we've gotten approval and are starting to push out benefits, our Secretary Setters, who's the director of our command center, has been sharing those updates at, the governor's press conferences, She also had a message focused around we were tracking the unpinned card rates, encouraging people to use their benefits and the importance of P-EBT. We also have been leveraging our press releases and to help tell these stories and the importance and get across the main points on P-EBT. It's been a complicated program, I think, because in the spring, the benefit amounts, is 2 issuances and $576 a day, and then September was 1 issuance and it was $586 a day, and then going forward now October, it's again a different issuance cycle and a different amount of money, and so that can be confusing. And so we've been trying through press and media to kind of reiterate those baseline things about the program to help make sure families understand what's new and why. And then we also worked with the Shaw Foundation and Wally the Green Monster, as you can see here on our screen, who is the Red Sox mascot, for those of you not from Massachusetts, to do a PSA. This was back in the spring when we kicked off P-EBT, and we found that, they have a different reach than, the agency is going to have, and that really helped reduce stigma to have Wally talking about this food assistance program in that way. And then Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, the First Lady also was generous with her time. She did a PSA for radio station and television. We worked with an agency who did this work pro bono for us and helped place these in TV and radio across the state in English and Spanish to reach a wider audience. In that case, we really wanted to make sure that people knew to check their mail for a card, because this was in the beginning, and we know how important that is in messaging that families didn't know to check the mail or didn't know what this was, and so we wanted to get the word out. These benefits are coming. Check your mail, and if you didn't get something in the mail, here's who to call. One other important thing that we did that I highly recommend if you're in another state and you're looking for something that works, we worked with El Mundo Boston, which is the largest news source for Spanish speakers in our state, and we did a series of Facebook Lives with them, and bottom right is a director of the Mayor's Office of Food Access in Boston, Catalina Lopez Espina, who led a discussion about P-EBT in Spanish and was able to answer questions in real time. This was really important, obviously, for the community in terms of getting the word out. Each of these had 5,000 views, which we thought was pretty impactful. And then we were able to take that video, post it on our website, share it with partners to get the message out in languages other than English, and also so that we didn't have to rely so much on written materials. We wanted to have a video source available as well. Next slide, please.
So P-EBT, is a entirely new federal program back in the spring, and one of the things we wanted to make sure we focused on was retailers, to make sure, one, that when families started showing up with this card, they knew what it was. Two, and at least in Massachusetts, it's one card is issued per child or per student, so a family could show up with multiple cards, and we wanted retailers to know that that's not fraud, that may happen. And so the team here presenting today, also with the Greater Boston Food Bank, I'd like to thank them and give them a shout out. They really helped us with this retailer outreach. They have great connections with retailers in our state. We're able to help craft the message and push this out, and we shared with retailer associations, and they shared with different retailers. We made flyers specific to retailers and social media posts and things that and flyers they could hang up in the store if families had questions around pinning the card when they were at the grocery store. And so that was kind of a major focus in the spring, and then we've been updating retailers, as time has gone on, to share, that this is continuing and how much money, is coming potentially into their stores. We also worked with a lot of community organizations. So DTA has contracted SNAP outreach providers, over 90 organizations across our state who help with SNAP application assistance. And so we worked closely with them, as well as our advisory boards, our SNAP coalition in the state that's run by the Mass Law Reform Institute, to help really get out the word and giving them materials that they can use to help when they're talking either with families or others, to help spread the word on P-EBT, recognizing, that this was a new thing that we didn't have before. and kind of always connecting it back to, as Miriam had mentioned, to SNAP. As I shared, about 60% of P-EBT recipients in Massachusetts do not get SNAP. And so part of this focus has been to close that P-EBT gap. And if we're talking to people about P-EBT, we should be talking to them about SNAP. Next slide.
So in addition to all of the outreach that Alana just outlined, schools were probably one of the most important ways that we reach families, and we know that schools are one of the most trusted and best ways for families to receive information. So as Sarah mentioned earlier, we created a toolkit for schools that included sample text messages, robocall scripts, and emails to share out with families, and we distributed that widely to schools across the state. We sent information out through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and also directly to school networks with a direct ask to share materials and resources to their families in a number of different ways. And we targeted a number of different school stakeholders. So we were sending emails to superintendents, we were sending emails to principals, we were sending emails to school nutrition directors, just trying to get at every angle that we could to get this information out. And one of the ways that we found worked best for schools was mass text messaging to families. So on the screen, you'll see an example of what Boston Public Schools did. They used the materials that were created on the Mass P-EBT website to reach families through text over the holidays and let them know that funds were arriving on their cards. And that was a quick and easy way to notify families. And again, other best practices were robocalls. So again, Boston Public Schools used some of the call language that we had provided and sent it out in email form as well as calling. There was social media. So Boston Public Schools, as you'll see on the screen, this post got over 93 shares. That was a huge way to reach some families. As well as including information in other languages, and encouraging schools to post about P-EBT on their website was kind of a seemingly simple thing, but we found that a lot of schools were not doing this. So just asking schools to make sure that it's included on all of their networks on their website and spread it as widely as possible was really important. And so in working with these schools, some of the other best practices that we found were really encouraging them to cross-promote P-EBT with other nutrition programs and primarily school meals. So many schools currently are serving grab-and-go free school meals, and cross-promoting helps increase participation in both of these programs. So again, was super important, and by accessing families as they were getting their meals, we could share information about P-EBT and vice versa. And if possible with staffing, it's the best practice to have one contact at the school level for P-EBT. For an example, in Brockton, the director of the Student and Family Engagement Center, who is also the SNAP coordinator, stepped up and was the primary point of contact for students. And this made it much easier for families to get information and to get the right help because they had just one point of contact. And then schools who utilize their networks and advocates also had a higher success rate of pinning. So really encouraging schools to use all of their networks, all of their school staff, teachers, students, and family advocates to help inform students of these funds was critical. Next slide, please.
Quickly, I'm realizing we only have 5 minutes left. So one of the things that was really central to our work was regular data analysis to see what issues were happening on the ground to help us develop our messaging. So that's where we looked at web and call data to identify things that people were looking at and were needing, and so we could adjust our messaging accordingly. One strategy I really want to highlight quickly that we did in Mass, we were very fortunate in that the DTA gave us zip code level data on P-EBT activations on a biweekly basis. So thanks to our partners, we were able to get those lists and distribute that data to cities and districts so that they could see where they were at. So how many kids in your district have have used and activated these cards. If you can get this from your state, we highly encourage you to ask. This is really essential in our strategy. One example of what we were able to do with this was we targeted cities with over 2,000 unactivated cards and reached out to the civic leaders and said, hey, you know, you have a large number of kids that aren't accessing this benefit. It also has a huge economic impact to your city. What can we do? So from there, we recorded virtual conversations with the mayors of those cities who answered questions that that people were really wanting to know in their communities. And then we pushed those out to local press, print and in digital and on social media too. So have the mayor of the city come out and say, you know, this is my goal to close this gap. This is Mayor Sullivan in Brockton here. And here's the ways that we can do this was really powerful. And Brockton actually through this and then the work of the person that Miriam was just referencing, they were actually able to close the gap by 1,200 students in a couple months, which was incredible on top of receiving replacement cards and all of those other things. We found that this strategy really, really worked. Next slide. Also through that data that we got, we recognized that that large number of cards were unactivated in cities with high Brazilian and Portuguese populations. So we partnered here with the Brazilian Women's Group, which has a huge following, 5,000 followers on social media, reached out to them. The biggest issue for that community, we were told, was the issue of public charge. So we invited Naomi Mayer here is on the right. She is an immigration attorney who speaks Portuguese, and Eloisa from Brazilian Women's Group led a discussion on P-EBT in regards to immigration status and also addressed other issues in Portuguese. And again, they could answer questions in real time, and we were able to leverage that video across. And this is something that we are going to do with other communities and with this P-EBT 2.0. Another thing that we recognize that students who are experiencing homelessness were having lower rates of card activations, and so we worked with the Mass Coalition for the Homeless to get the word out, and are also encouraging schools to directly call those students who are experiencing homelessness to see how they can best support them. Next slide.
So this has definitely been quite a process, and, you know, we're so thankful for all of the partnership and everyone who was working on this. We've definitely learned a lot. And so I think while the overwhelming response has been positive, there's definitely been some lessons learned that I think, you know, hopefully will be relevant to everyone in other states as well. So at Project Bread, our hotline counselors were on the ground and we're really hearing directly from folks and hearing their questions and the challenges they were having in using their cards. And so some of the big questions we were hearing were, you know, how to activate their cards. There was a specific issue in Massachusetts with our EBT vendor that resulted in a process that was a little bit more confusing for families. There were also many families that their addresses had changed, or they lost their card, or they never received a card or a letter in the mail, and so they were calling us to request a new card, to get their case number, and to get their activation PIN. And so we were realizing that we needed an easier way to give this information to families, so that they wouldn't have to wait in line to call or to talk to someone, or, you know, be going back and forth between DTA and between our hotline to get information. So we worked with DTA and SHA to set up a button on the P-EBT website. And so families could go through and find the information that they needed immediately versus having to call in, which was definitely very helpful. We also updated the website so the homepage immediately directed people to the answers to the most common questions, and re-messaged as we were hearing where people were having confusion or issues, and created new materials and translated and redistributed these to partners as quickly and as often as possible. And so I think having open and constant communication really helped to address these issues quickly and provide families with the help they needed. And I think it's also really important to know that you do want to balance having a simple messaging and something that can work, you know, across the board with having enough programmatic information. I think because P-EBT can get so complicated, families really have, you know, struggled to understand what their benefits are, how they utilize them. So really, trying to make it clear and getting input from a number of different partners on whether things make sense, what questions they have before you share messaging out is so important.
I know we're at time, but I just want to say thank you all. Our contact information is on here. Please feel free to reach out to us. We have shared sample notices with other states. We're more than willing to either jump on a call or, as Sarah mentioned, provide any files or resources that may be helpful to your state as you're thinking about your P-EBT communications, and share any, what other challenges or best practices we found. But I want to thank again FRAC for having us today and giving us the opportunity to share this with all of you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. If we can go to the next slide. I know we're running over just a little bit, but I really wanted to draw your attention to one of our brand new resources. Just today, FRAC released the updated communications toolkit for P-EBT 2.0. It includes best practices for communications and outreach for states, cities, school districts, and communication and community organizations, as well as examples from these entities that were utilized in the last iteration of P-EBT. I also put the link to this in the chat. So if you go to the top of the chat, it should be there. Next slide. Included with the communications toolkit, we have some customizable materials such as graphics and flyers for organizations to fill in with state-specific information on P-EBT. These will also soon be available in other languages. Next slide. And just to wrap up here, just a few more resources we've compiled for learning more about P-EBT, including our piece on strategies states can implement to ensure all eligible families are able to access P-EBT. We also want to draw attention to our next webinar, Strategies to Increase School Meal Application Returns, and that's on January 19th. Over the next few weeks, we'll keep adding more webinars for P-EBT deep dives, so keep checking the FRAC events page for those links. Last slide. So we unfortunately don't have time for questions, but you're welcome to send your questions to my email, which I will put in the chat, and I will follow up with the panelists with your questions. So I'm going to enter that in the chat now. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you have a great rest of your week and a great weekend.